share my. All right. Thank you for having me. It's good to be with all of you. I am an extension educator in food, nutrition, and health with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and also a PhD candidate at The Ohio State with research that focuses on food equity and community-based work towards food equity. So I'm going to give a kind of broad overview of food security, what it is and what it looks like in Nebraska, before we move on to what Stephanie and Victoria have to say in kind of more specific details around what's going on in Omaha and Lincoln. So food security is, I think it's always important to start with some definitions because language matters, the way we talk about things matters. So food security exists when all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to safe, sufficient, nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active lifestyle. So the key thing here is that food is, when we have food security, food is readily available, and that people have the ability to acquire those foods in ways that are socially acceptable. So that means without resorting to emergency food supplies, which sometimes people feel shame around having to access food in those ways, that people can acquire food without having to scavenge or steal or resort to other coping strategies that happen when people are really desperate. And so in Nebraska, our rate of households that are food insecure is 10.6%. That's just a little bit higher than the national average, which is 10.4%. And so if food security is having that readily available access to food, insecurity is having a lack of access, not enough food to lead an active, healthy life, and also just the limited or uncertain availability. So that feeling of not knowing where your next meal comes from is what it means to be food insecure. In addition to food security broadly, we also talk more specifically about nutrition security. And nutrition security means consistent access, availability, and affordability of foods and beverages that promote well-being, prevent disease, and if needed, treat disease, particularly among racial ethnic minorities, low-income, and rural and remote populations, including tribal communities and insular areas. So this is an emerging concept that comes from food security, but is really highlighting some key things that sometimes get left out of the discussion on food insecurity. And that is that food, it's not just about how much food you have, but the quality of the food you have. We know that people in the United States as a whole often fall short in the dietary guidelines and eating enough nutritious foods. And it's very important that people not only have available access to food broadly, but nutritious foods that are really going to promote well-being and health. And also, this definition emphasizes equity and the importance of ensuring that our efforts towards nutrition security serve all populations and promote access, availability, and affordability across populations. And this is what I'm going to dig into a little bit more in a bit, is where that equity piece comes in to food security. And so there are four kind of key components to nutrition security. First, is food accessible? Are there stores near you? Can you get to the store? And we can think about what sort of barriers might exist that makes food difficult to access for some people. So in really rural parts of Nebraska, you might have to travel a long way to get to a store. And how are you getting to the store? Are you going in a personal vehicle? Are you using public transportation in one of our urban areas? Are you hitching a ride with a friend? Do you have any sort of physical disability that makes it challenging for you to get out and get to the store on your own? So all of those pieces come into whether food is accessible. And then food needs to be available. So when you get to the store, does the store near you or another place you might be going for food have nutritious food available? What kinds of food are available where you can access them? This is where, sometimes we'll talk about stores that may have difficulty stocking a full variety of foods, and stocking fresh produce in particular can be very challenging in remote areas and in inner city areas. And so what kinds of food are available? The next component is affordable. Can you actually purchase the food that you need to live a healthy life? And lastly, is the food acceptable? Is the food high quality? Does it meet your dietary needs? Those might be medical needs. People have different food allergies. Does it meet religious dietary needs? I know from my work here in Omaha, there are a number of food pantries that serve populations that require halal foods. Do they have the foods that are acceptable for their clientele? And is it culturally affirming? Food is about nutrition, but it's also about these rich relationships we have with each other and with where that food is coming from. And so do people have foods that affirm their cultural heritage and their cultural practices around food? And so all of that gets encompassed into food and nutrition security. And so I want to look at just a quick measure, again, thinking about how this varies across different geographies and different populations. This is a map of the Food Environment Index, with the red being kind of lower quality food environments to the blue being comparatively higher quality food environments. And this is incorporating both the accessibility and the availability and the affordability. So this looks at a measure that incorporates how close people are living to a grocery store, 1 mile in urban areas, 10 miles in rural areas, and then also whether people, what their income level is and whether they are food insecure, stating they had no access to reliable food in the past year. So you can see it varies across the state. In a rural state, access to food can be particularly challenging. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I want to also just touch on quickly why food security matters. From a health perspective, you notice health was worked into both the definitions of food security and nutrition security. We know that diet-related diseases are the leading causes of death in the United States. And these diseases, heart disease, cancer, maybe not quite as much COVID-19, but many of these chronic diseases have a correlation with diets, and eating a nutritious diet, having enough food to eat, are important in maintaining your day-to-day health to prevent both chronic and acute diseases. Alongside physical health is mental health and stress. Food insecurity is associated with psychological distress, such as anxiety and depression. And that relationship has been found in adults, youth, young adults, people with chronic diseases. For example, food insecurity was associated with a 257% higher risk of anxiety during the pandemic specifically. So during this already stressful time, not feeling like you have the food you need to eat, increased anxiety levels. And you can see this image on the screen shows this kind of cycle of food insecurity and chronic disease that is driven by the underlying stress on people's mental health that then includes physical health. When you don't have enough to eat, you have to go with coping strategies that might not allow you to live as healthy. And so these additional healthcare expenditures can increase that stress, and then we continue the cycle. So food security is really important for both physical and mental health, and it's also important from an equity perspective. We know food insecurity is higher among certain populations, among non-Hispanic Black households, Hispanic households, low-income households, and then households with children and households headed by a single adult. And this is where food justice is another term that comes into these conversations and really asks us to take a structural view, looking at why those differences exist and how the food system has created inequalities in who's experiencing food security and who's experiencing food insecurity. So this is a big timeline, and we won't touch on all of it, but I want to highlight a few key factors and bring the conversation a little bit more specifically into the Omaha area and the Lincoln area to think about some of these historical events that have impacted Nebraska and impact how food security looks across the state and within these two urban areas. So in 1830, the Indian Removal Act resulted in tens of thousands of indigenous people across this country being removed from their historic homelands. And during the same time in the Great Plains, bison extermination by the US government was weaponizing food as a way to further disenfranchise Native American populations. And so this is just one way food was a part of that conversation around removing people from the land that was then redistributed at low cost to settlers, most of whom were white. In the late 1800s through the 1900s, we have the passing of Jim Crow laws, which institutionalized discrimination against African Americans in the South and resulted in sharecropping relationships that made it very difficult for Black land ownership to exist. And we had further discrimination within the USDA that resulted in Black landowners losing their land at far higher rates than white landowners. And so then we move into urban areas, and we have some patterns. You may have seen these maps before. These are maps from the Homeowners Loan Association. In 1933, the Homeowners Loan Act established a lending program to increase homeownership in the United States. And the Homeowners Lending Corporation created these maps grading cities across the United States based on the desirability of different areas, and explicitly used discriminatory language towards ethnic and racial minorities, particularly Black communities, as well as low-income areas, to grade certain areas as red, resulting in what we now call redlining, where these neighborhoods were not giving loans at great rates, meaning that these neighborhoods became segregated by race and income and experienced disinvestment, resulting in disinvestment that persists today. So you can see some of those same areas that were redlined on those 1930s maps. So this is maps of Douglas County. And on these maps, the cross-hatched kind of line-covered census tract areas are those that are low food access, so that there's limited grocery store availability. And we also see concentrations of poverty and Black and Hispanic populations. And then the last map is ratings of fair or poor quality health in some of these areas that experience disinvestment because of those structural forces that also resulted in grocery stores moving out of the neighborhoods because they were viewed as not good places for lending, for homeownership, or for businesses. And so we still have resulting places where there is lower access to grocery stores and higher poverty rates and lower accompanying health. And these are those same maps. You can see similar patterns in Lincoln, where you're seeing concentrations of poverty and rates of rating their health as fair or poor. And so in response to some of these structural forces that have created environments that then food insecurity becomes an issue in, there have been a variety of movements over time to combat food insecurity and to promote better health and well-being among different communities. And so I want to highlight some survival programs that started in the 1960s. The Black Panther Party established programs to meet community needs, including some of the first free breakfast programs in the nation. So the free breakfast that's now offered at public schools was first piloted by the Black Panther Party, including in Omaha. And this program, as well as a variety of others, really lean into this idea that's expressed in this definition of food justice, which is that communities exercise their right to grow, sell, and eat healthy food. Healthy food is fresh, nutritious, affordable, culturally appropriate, and grown locally with the care for the well-being of the land, workers, and animals. And so today in Nebraska, there are a variety of efforts to increase food security. We have federal, state, and local government efforts through programs like WIC and SNAP, which is this Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that supplement income to increase the affordability of food. Double Up Food Bucks, which is a program extension runs that doubles purchases with SNAP on fresh produce. But then there's many community-based approaches that are working on promoting resilience and sovereignty and the ability of communities within Nebraska to produce their own food and to learn to grow and cook and share their foods within the community. So this is a quick whirlwind. There's a couple of references. I look forward to conversation after hearing what Victoria and Stephanie have to say. So thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm up next. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria O'Neill. I'm the director of, excuse me, pardon me. I'm the director of Hunger Relief and Volunteerism at Matt Talbot Kitchen and Outreach in Lincoln. You have to apologize. I'm fighting horrible allergies today, so excuse me. But for those of you that are not familiar with Matt Talbot, we have been in existence for about 30 years, a little over 30 years. We were started by two individuals who wanted to help people that were living on the streets of Lincoln, especially those who were experiencing substance issues. Through the years, we have grown quite a bit with a full-time staff. When they first started, they were just volunteers. And over the years, many different programs have been added. So in addition to our hunger relief program, we do offer outreach, which is a variety of different things. And it can entail picking up your mail for individuals who are not housed. They can come in and take a shower with us, do their laundry service. If they need hygiene products, assistance with, just anything that you could possibly think of as far as like IDs, birth certificates, just things that unfortunately we probably take for granted on a day-to-day basis. And if you're, living on the streets and maybe just own a backpack, you probably don't have the basic necessities that we just have laying around our house. So we try to have as much as we possibly can available for the individuals that are coming in. We also have 4 licensed counselors on staff that work with individuals that are working through substance addiction. And we also, within that program, offer 3 transition houses where individuals can stay up to 2 years on clean, sober living houses and work through the program. They come in and help out, volunteer at Matt Talbot, go through different kinds of education programs, counseling. And then the hope is, once they graduate the program and feel that they can live outside of the sober living home, that they would be able to have a fresh start. So that's a wonderful program that we offer. And we also have a variety of housing. So Matt Talbot does not have emergency shelter. What our philosophy is to get individuals into permanent housing. And we work to a couple different ways, either that if an individual has assistance that they can pay for their housing themselves, and maybe they don't have the best credit, or maybe they've had bad rental history, something like that. We have a variety of landlords that work with us in the area and allow Matt Talbot to work with them and hopefully get certain individuals that are housed off of the Lancaster County list of people that are looking for housing. And then we also have a grant, it's called First Hope, and that's for individuals that are chronically homeless and are on permanent disability. And they can apply for this grant, or they apply for us to get them housed, and then we would house them through this grant, and Matt Talbot then would pay for their housing. So those are just I guess a really high level overview of the services that we offer. Just to give you an example of what we're looking at as far as numbers of people that we assist. Last month, in the month of April, we had 20,446 instances of hunger relief. And that is either through people coming in for our hunger relief program. We have a variety of days that we are giving out food, either through like outreach pantry bags. And then we also have, we're not a food net, but I guess we have our variation of a food net at Matt Talbot, where people can come in and we have items out throughout the week where people can help themselves with that. And then we also offer, we have a Hope Garden. So that's something else that we provide for people with fresh vegetables. We just got done planting over 200 vegetables in our garden. So that is something else that we'll be offering this summer. We also bring food out to the community. We just started going out to the downtown library and bringing food out there to individuals who aren't making it into Matt Talbot for services. And something new that we're trying to work on as far as our nutrition, because nutrition security is very important. Just like Kelsey had said, is we are offering 2 different classes through UNL Extension that they come into Matt Talbot, and we have one for our guests that anyone is welcome to come in. Once a month, we're offering these classes, and the individuals can come in and learn about different type of nutrition, ask questions, just try to make it more like a, just open conversation for people if they have any kinds of questions, and, different ways to be able to prepare food. And we also have a time during the class that we actually are also preparing something to give them some ideas on what they can do. And then we also offer a class once a quarter for our hunger relief teams, and we are working to try to make them more knowledgeable on different ways of preparing their food. There's sort of a common misconception sometimes, when you're feeding individuals that maybe are homeless, living on the street. Obviously, we work a lot with the working poor, that, this maybe is their only meal that they're eating today. And a lot of times it's heavy in carbs and things like that. So we are really trying to change that misconception and, tell everybody, or show everyone the different varieties of ways of being able to make their meals that they're preparing more nutritional rather for our guests that are coming in. We see a lot of obesity, and obviously with that causes lots of health problems. And so we are trying to really focus on that and, make our guests more aware of better, healthy ways of eating. As far as with our numbers, we have seen about a 35% increase over last year. So we're coming into our extremely busy time of the year this summer. We definitely see our numbers skyrocket. So we are, trying to prepare the best that we can to be able to feed as many people that, possibly need it in our community. And I think that's about it.
Okay, so I guess it's me then. I'm going to share my screen. Pay no attention to all my tabs. Okay, so obviously our topic is food security. Thank you, Victoria, for your work. Thank you, Kelsey, for the thorough explanation. And I really appreciated seeing that timeline history, and we almost had the same conversation. So I'm glad I switched gears. So my name is Stephanie Finklia. I am the sole proprietor of Black Chick Farm, which is a directive, not a destination. So I say that because typically when people think about a farm, they think about, acres and acres of land, and that's generally bringing to mind typically a white man. So Black Chick Farm it lives in me. And I grow in my home in North Omaha. I also have an empty lot that I'm cultivating. I met a community member who needs help on their space, which is about an acre of land. And then I pop around to different homeowners and I assist them with their gardening and farming, small scale farming. I also co-founded Omaha Sunflower Cooperative, but that's on the next slide. It's a little bit about me personally. On the bottom left is a photo of myself and my partner. We love being outdoors and hiking and going and finding different waterfalls in the country. This is in Decorah. We're close to Decorah. It's in Iowa. So it's very small. So we don't really pay attention to TLC's warning of going and chasing waterfalls. We love to do it. It's one of our favorite things to do together. In the middle is a photograph of my great grandfather and my great grandmother, Albert and Laura McQueen. As Kelsey mentioned in that timeline graph, he was fortunate enough to acquire some acres of land in South Carolina and ended up having to sell away some of those acres as his family fled the state during the Great Migration in seeking out safety and job opportunity. I just learned about him. He farmed about, I'm gonna say about 10 acres and it was a big orchard. And so that is also why Black Chick Farm is one of my directives. I believe that I inherited from my ancestors the ability to be growing, the ability to establish relationship with the land. And so I just wanted to honor the two of them. On the top is my dog, Dash. He is the biggest wiener dog you've ever seen. I call him the Clifford of dachshunds. And then the little kitten is my cat Odyssey that I acquired from the earth. A stray had babies in my window well, and he just became mine. So this photo on the left is me at my, I call it my incubator site. That's my home in North Omaha. In the back, I do have 5 chickens. I had 6, but one got sick. So I keep 5 chickens. My partner helps me out with that. I compost on site. So you see there's a tumbler in that photo, but I also utilize 3 now wooden compost bins that my partner manages. He's been doing it for years at his own home. And so it's been nice to have him here with me taking care of that. So we compost our chicken manure, we compost our food scraps, we compost things from the garden, and it's been really wonderful to add that rich soil back into my growing space. I utilize the method of the Ovambo people, who are people in Africa, where they create mounds that you don't step on, you keep it nice, that soil nice and loose. And then in between those mounds, you dig out kind of a shallow trench, and those are your walkways that are dedicated to walk paths. That was closer to the winter time, so it wasn't time to grow. So I do cover my soil with leaf mulch over the winter to keep the soil protected. In the center there are my logos for Black Chick Farm, and in the bottom is Omaha Sunflower Cooperative, which is a cooperative of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, so Asian American, Pacific Islanders, and Latino folks who are in agricultural practices. We grow together, we go to market together, and then on the far right is a photo of us at Food Day Omaha, where we won the Producer of the Year award. And in that instance, when the person on the third from the left, their name is Dex, kind of manifested that we would grow more this year, and that is coming to fruition. So we're excited about this new season. Okay, so I won't go over this in depth because Kelsey already did. That's just the definition of food security, and you can read about that. But I think that I'd like to push the conversation to food sovereignty. I think that food security can come from food sovereignty, and food sovereignty is the right of peoples to a healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and their right to define their food and agricultural systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies, rather than the demands of markets and corporations. So one of the things that Kelsey had spoken about in her presentation was that the indigenous of this land, Turtle Island, North America, including Canada, and South America, were the original stewards of this space. They had formed relationships and bonds with the earth, the topography, the plants, the animals, and stripping them of that space, stripped them of their practices and relationship with their food. And so food sovereignty seeks to return that, not only to the indigenous, but to other peoples. So the principles of food sovereignty is that it's food for the people. Food sovereignty puts the right to sufficient, healthy, and culturally appropriate, or affirming, I like to use, food for all at the center of food, agriculture, livestock, and fisheries policies. So our current food system is more based in what's going to produce the most money. Whereas with food sovereignty, we're thinking about what is going to serve the people. Another principle of food sovereignty is honoring the food producers. Food sovereignty values all those who grow, harvest, and process food, including women, family farmers, herders, fisher people, forest dwellers, indigenous peoples, and agricultural, migrant, and fisheries workers. One of the things Kelsey touched on as well was migrant workers and farmers' rights activists, which is huge. I mean, right now we still have this political debate about immigrant and migrant farm workers, build the wall and all of those things, and the unethical treatment of farm workers, and this principle of food sovereignty seeks to honor those people. We know that without farmers, without growers, we would not be eating. And so we want to put that emphasis on showing them that they are worthy of respect and a healthy life as well. Another principle of food sovereignty is that it builds local food systems. It brings food providers and consumers closer together so they can make joint decisions on food issues that benefit and protect all. And I think it's really important to note that when we have discussions like this about who we're protecting, it's also the trees, it's also the insect populations and the animals. It is not just human life form. Local control. Food sovereignty respects the right of food providers to have control over their land, seeds, and water, and rejects the privatization of natural resources. So with this, there's a movement called Land Back, and it focuses on returning Indigenous peoples to their ancestral homelands and regions. And we have to start thinking about how we police state parks and national parks, which were originally spaces that Indigenous people stewarded. We have to start thinking about HOAs and how those things govern how people can treat their lawns. You know, like I said, I'm a farmer and I grow in my own home. My raised beds are in my backyard. Those mounds are in my backyard, but I do some permaculture in my front yard. And I'm grateful that my community does not have an HOA and I am allowed to do those things and have chickens and things like that. But we've got to be more mindful of how our society polices what others do with the spaces that they've been allotted. Wisdom sharing is a principle of food sovereignty. So food sovereignty values the sharing of local knowledge and skills that have been passed down over generations for sustainable food production free from technologies that undermine health and well-being. With that, I just wanted to add that sometimes bigger isn't always better. Having to use a lot of heavy farm equipment compacts the soil, which can damage the soil structure. Using technologies like chemicals and pesticides and herbicides so that, you know, you can get that perfect looking leaf of collard green or a tomato without deformity. That's not how nature works. Nature is all kinds of shapes and sizes and tiny bites that another living being has used for its own health and well-being. And so passing that wisdom along in our society, that we have to stop expecting for things to look perfect. Sharing wisdom in agricultural practices that are holistic and that are reciprocal with the ways of nature, and the knowledge of how to maintain that, how to be sustainable. Indigenous, African American, African, you know, I mentioned the Ovambo, who I took my practice from, have a wealth of knowledge verbally passed down from one another, and so that should be honored and respected as a way of growing our knowledge in our food system. Food sovereignty works in reciprocity with all life. I kind of mentioned before, food sovereignty focuses on production and harvesting methods that maximize the contribution of ecosystems, avoid costly and toxic inputs, and improve the resiliency of local food systems in the face of climate change. So, you know, not necessarily just focusing on those commercial crops. The indigenous that stewarded this land gathered. Not all people were farmers. Not all people had cultivation practices. Some just went out into nature, went out to the earth and gathered what they needed. So part of that is also returning to our spaces these native plants that were here long before colonization, which is another point about, you know, HOAs and things like that that will allow for planting native landscaping, policing how people reintroduce those plants, but they're necessary for our indigenous and native pollinators. Those are their sources of food, their sources for homes, and they are worthy of respect and acknowledgement as well. So there are some things happening to make food sovereignty a reality. There's the land back movement, which has existed for generations with a long legacy of organizing and sacrifice to get indigenous lands back into indigenous hands. And then landback.org is an organization that's national. You can donate to them, look for other ways to get involved, and just support the return of indigenous lands back to indigenous peoples. Blazing Star Seed Cooperative is a grassroots organization creating a robust seed saving community in Omaha, Nebraska. And there's our Instagram information. So what they do is their members grow out plants utilizing seed saving practices of variety isolation, and population. So for example, tomatoes need to be at least 40 feet away from a different tomato variety so that they don't cross-pollinate. And that's so you can make sure that you have a variety that is true to type. And so that would be an heirloom variety that, like, one of my favorites, Mary Reynolds, has been cultivated for 50 plus years. And so if I want to ensure that I'm going to get a Mary Reynolds tomato, when I grow out the seeds, I want to make sure to isolate that Mary Reynolds tomato plant from any other tomato variety so that they don't cross-pollinate and create something else. So members grow out seeds. They bring their fruit or their harvest to the seed processing days in October on Sundays at Reformed. And the community is welcome to come and go through that process of saving tomato seeds, or go through that process of saving flower seeds, so that we all have some wisdom shared about how to save seed together. Then a third of those seeds are put into a seed bank where they are kept, and that is added to every year so that Omaha and surrounding areas have a robust seed bank for in times of emergencies. For instance, when COVID was at its peak, places like Johnny's Seed Company, they weren't selling seeds to home gardeners or small scale gardeners. They were only selling to commercial farming industries. But as we've been talking about, creating a local food economy is essential to making sure that everyone has respect and has food, culturally affirming food, and that there's enough. So that seed bank is being created by Blazing Star Seed Cooperative. And then a third is given back out to their members. And then another third is distributed. Oh my gosh, I can see packets. Another third is distributed to the community through seed shares. So if you'd like to get in touch with them, there's their Instagram and their email. Sacred Seed by Taylor Keene. Their mission is to increase education and awareness around Indigenous environmentalism. They do not sell their seeds, but rather look for ambassadors to house a growing location. They strive to move away from harmful industrial agricultural practices and embrace native techniques. And then there's the website there. So if you have space, in your backyard or another location where you can grow out some of those sacred indigenous seeds that have been saved and stewarded for generations, they're looking for folks to support that effort. Free Farm Syndicate is a free community garden and produce stand. The stands are open every Saturday and Sunday, June through October, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And they do invite folks to come out and help them farm. They're on about 5 lots throughout Omaha. And if anybody's interested, I do have the locations for when their farm stands are open. And then folks are welcome to bring, if you garden at home, you're welcome to bring produce that you have at home that you have an abundance of, and, leave some tomatoes, take some potatoes, that kind of thing. And finally, Omaha Sunflower Cooperative's mission is to replenish, strengthen, and elevate the BIPOC community and members of the cooperative with community-sustained nutritional and financial support. We are committed to fostering holistic relationships between local BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, and people of color, growers, farmers, and business owners to reclaim and cultivate our cultural wisdom. So yeah, we grow together, we go to market together. This year, we're venturing into doing some wholesale so we can sell to local restaurants and nonprofit food hubs as well, as a way to start building a local economy and food system focused specifically on Black, Indigenous, and people of color in those areas that were kind of outlined where predominantly Black and Latine or Hispanic folks are not getting the nutritional support that they need. All right, and then those are some resources where I found the definition for food security and then the one for food sovereignty.
Thank you all so much for presenting and going over that information. I really enjoyed that. If anyone has any questions, now is a great time to get into the Q&A and drop those questions in there and we can answer those. If you do have a question, please, if you're asking it to a specific person, please put their name in there so we know who you're directing the question to. For now, I'm going to start a quick poll and just kidding, there is not a poll. Usually we have a poll, but I don't see a poll. So never mind, I'm not going to start a poll. If you have any questions, please ask them. I'll give a few moments for questions to.
Yeah. While folks are thinking of some questions, these are examples of Blazing Stars seeds that they distribute to the community through seed shares. You can find seeds at Reformed, at events that Omaha Sunflower Cooperative puts on. Fabric Lab has some, No More Empty Pots has seeds. The Big Garden has seeds, if you ever buy those places, but yeah, this is what that grassroots organization is working on.
I guess I have a question for Stephanie. What motivated you to start the Sunflower Cooperative?
Ooh. I have worked for nonprofits in the past, and I got really frustrated with kind of that industrial complex, and wanted something different, but I didn't want to do any kind of like corporation because that felt icky too. And Nancy Williams from No More Empty Pots suggested a cooperative, and so I started looking further into what that would look like. and I read this book called Freedom Farmers. And it's about Black cooperatives and its history with the civil rights movement, how pivotal farmers, Black farmers specifically, were for that movement. And so I read about Freedom Farm, which was started by Fannie Lou Hamer in Sunflower County, Mississippi. And so that's kind of also where we got our name from. And I wanted to see something that was by the community, for the community, not only, you know, addressing nutritional needs, but also financial needs. We live in a capitalistic society, and money brings you the power of choice. And I wanted for folks to be able to choose what they wanted to do with the direction they wanted to take their nutrition. You know, we can tell them that we want them to eat these things, but ultimately, you know, freedom of choice is pivotal.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I think we have another question. What is a way to get normal refrigerated items into food pantries? How can we get more of those items to those in need? I'm assuming this probably is a question for Victoria.
I wasn't sure if anyone was going to jump in. So, you know, because we aren't actually like a food bank, you know, we provide all those with our meals. But I know through the food bank, when they have them available, they do provide milk and eggs, dairy products, things like that. Unfortunately, it really is just up to who their donors are. You know, through USDA, what they are providing. You know, it's a great question, because it is something that we don't always have to be able to hand out at Matt Talbot. You know, we buy our own milk, you know, to be able to provide to our guests. It's not something that we get donated. I mean, directly from like a dairy. We obviously are purchasing it through our donations that we're receiving. But yes, there definitely is a need for that, you know, as well as the fresh vegetables and things like that. I know at Matt Talbot, one of our biggest issues are the types of items that are being dropped off. You know, there definitely is nutrition insecurities, because we're getting tons of bread dropped off, we're getting sweets dropped off. We're not necessarily getting fresh vegetables, meats, you know, eggs, dairy, things like that people need to have. And, you know, as we know that, you know, it's much easier just to, you know, go down the street sometimes and you can get a McDonald's hamburger for, you know, $1 versus going out and getting a fresh salad at a restaurant or something, which, you know, could be $13. So, I mean, there's definitely a big need for places like us to get those types of items in. And it's not easy right now to get that.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. They also said, I appreciate everything and everyone's work here. Thank you so much. We appreciate having you here. Sam asked Stephanie, what can we do as community members that would have the greatest positive impact for food sovereignty and food security?
That's a great question. Thank you, Sam. I would say support Black, Indigenous, and people of color growers and farmers. Plant native species in your lawn if you can. Like I said, I know there's HOAs and there's some things around that, but participate in Blazing Stars Seed Cooperative. I don't know if Lincoln has one, but I know Omaha OPL, Omaha Public Library, also has a seed sharing library where you can use your library card and check out seeds. And so you can help with building out that seed bank. Get involved in a community garden to help grow some of that food that's going to pantries and community members who are dealing with food insecurity. Start growing a garden yourself. Get some community members together and start a community garden. I don't know, does the land bank operate in Lincoln as well, or is that just in Omaha? Does anybody know? I might have to look at that, but I know.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I know Omaha, depending on where you are, Sam, I suppose. But I know in Omaha you can, lease like land for like a year at a time.
We have I'm sorry to interrupt. I couldn't get myself off of mute. I'm having a problem. We do have the community crops gardens throughout Lincoln.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You can donate to that landback.org. You can participate in that sacred seed if you have space to grow out some of those indigenous crops. Those are just a few off the top, just a few off the top of my head. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for asking.
How do you address the meat options in food security? I'm not sure who wants to answer that, but
I'm not 100% sure what is being asked in this question. So maybe the person who put it in could add some additional detail for us.
I suppose, how do you make sure meat is available
Is that
to food insecure
the
folks?
question? How meat is available?
Well, I can speak
Yes,
for
ma'am.
us as far as Man Talbot. I mean, we are not always providing a meat option. We try to make sure that we're including protein. So either if a meat is not available, then it's through eggs or beans, things like that. But I mean, it is a big, a big issue as far as making sure that people are getting lean, proteins. And it's not always accessible to people. We even find issues with, trying to get food ourselves, unless we're just going directly to the stores and purchasing it. But the items that are donated, aren't those types of options sometimes. We are lucky with some of the meat distributors that they are starting to work with us. We're trying to work with Tyson. We have been able to work with Piedmontese, which is a local meat producer here in Lincoln. But I'm sure when you go to, a food net or a food bank, it's not necessarily something that you're going to be able to see in the foods that you're receiving.
Thanks, Victoria, for your insight. I think to highlight what Victoria said at the beginning, there are other nutritional proteins as well. So some of the pantries I've worked with in Omaha, when they don't have meat, are making sure they have something like beans or nuts for those who can eat those nut butters available, soy products, and I think being in Nebraska, we have, with the large ranching community, there is a little bit more access to meat, both at affordable prices and in some of the pantries and emergency food supplies than I've seen in other states, just because there is more beef in particular raised here. But yeah, as Victoria said, it's not always available.
For the co-op, I guess for me, I don't have a big enough space to have, you know, like I would think I could do maybe broiler chickens, chickens raised for meat, but I just don't have the space for that. So I would love to be able to meet other Black, Indigenous, or other people of color who are ranchers in that way. But I don't know that there are. If you know of any, send them the co-op's way, I suppose.
Cool, and that looks like all the questions we have right now. I guess if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. I'm trying to think of a quick question here.
I have a question for Kelsey. Will you send me that historical timeline? That was really great.
Absolutely. Yes, I'd be happy to.
Can you put me on that email too?
Yes, I'd be happy to share it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Someone said, great presentation. Thank you. Okay, well, I'd like to just thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to be here today. I really appreciated having everyone here today and getting all this information out there and just helping everyone understand have a better understanding of what food security is and what we can do to help combat it. So with that, I will end things. Thank you guys for coming here.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.